Hey everyone, here today to talk about the War of 1812, which is also called the Second War of Independence. So this will be on chapters 11, the end of chapter 11, parts of chapter 12, so basically pages 228 to 241. So let's do it. Alrighty. So anyways, we basically left off with Thomas Jefferson's presidency. We know Jefferson's presidency does not end very well. Okay, we know he basically ends with the Embargo Act, and basically it kind of ruins the economy. And Jefferson, even though he's very well known today and considered a pretty good president, he leaves pretty unpopular. People are very unpleased. But anyways, the Federalist Party is weak, and Jefferson's basically handpicked successor James Madison wins a very easy election. Okay, so if you look at the map in the lower right-hand corner, you can see that the Democratic Republicans just dominate, and it's really not even close. So anyways, we kind of pick up where we left off. We have all these same issues going on. The Americans at this time are having a real hard time with trade. The French and the British have basically cut off our trade because of the Napoleonic Wars and stuff going on. So of course we had the Embargo Act that was put in place by Jefferson. It was incredibly unpopular, not very successful. They then changed course a little bit. They passed what's known as the Non-Intercourse Act of 1809, which reopened trade with the rest of the world except the British and the French, which really didn't do much. Okay, but it was set to expire in 1810. And when Madison becomes president, basically Congress passes the Mason's Bill No. 2. And basically what this says is it tries to hold a little carrot up for the British and the French, saying whoever is the kind of the first to repeal the restrictions will repeal our embargo. So you take away your restrictions, we'll take away our embargo. And so basically it's we're trying to play these guys off of one another. Okay, now Napoleon basically says that he'll lift his restrictions if the British do. So basically it's all on the British. So we're looking at the British. Come on, guys, open up your restrictions, let us trade again. The British say no, and that's really going to kind of push us closer to war with these guys. So basically there's really no movement on all these issues of free trade. The British are still impressing our sailors, so there's still a lot of anger with these guys. Okay. On top of that, we have a lot of new politicians that are coming from these new Western states. Okay, so we have a lot of people coming from the states of Kentucky, Tennessee, and Ohio, and these people are known as kind of war hawks. Okay, they're very eager to go to war. Okay, they're very angry, just like other Americans are over the British, but they're especially angry because the British have been arming Native Americans who have been coming into this territory here and attacking settlements. Okay, and so a lot of these Western politicians and Southern politicians are very angry with all the Indian threats in all these areas here, as I'm having issues drawing here. Okay, so basically all the Americans are kind of angry with what's going on. New England's especially angry with with the embargo. The settlers are angry with the Indian attacks, and obviously everyone's kind of just embarrassed about the whole issue with impressment. So basically everyone's angry. Okay, everyone wants these problems to be resolved, and they're getting closer and closer to war. On top of that, we have a Native American movement led by Tecumseh and his brother, who's known as the Prophet. They're trying to protect Native American land that's being basically taken by white settlers. So they're attacking American settlers. There's a governor of Indiana named Harrison, who eventually will become president, but he basically leads an attack on Tecumseh and his Indian allies, and he wins. The Americans win. But the interesting thing is that Tecumseh, when he loses, he retreats to Canada, which reinforces the war hawks argument that the British are supporting these Native Americans, okay, that are attacking these settlements, which is going to make people want war even more, okay? And so basically, we get to the point where the trade issue is a mess, the impressment issue is a mess, the issue with the British Army Native Americans is a mess, and basically decided that we're not respected. Okay, we are being run over. We are not being treated as an equal nation. We have to stand up. We have to stand up to the British. We have to tell them we're not going to take this anymore. Okay, and so here's one of the sad ironies of the day back then. It's just kind of funny. But the British basically decide that war is really not what they want. Okay, the British are like, we don't really want war with these guys. We don't want this. And so, like in May, the British decide to say, you know what, we're gonna stop doing all this stuff. We're gonna meet the demands of the Americans. We're gonna open up trade. We're gonna stop all the impressment business. And so in May, they basically decide that here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna stop. We're gonna change everything we've been doing because we don't want this. We don't need this right now. Unfortunately, they made this decision like in May 11th or something like that. But by June 2nd, the letter that they were sending us telling us they were going to meet our demands hadn't got to us yet. And so on June 2nd, we declare war on the British. And we write a note to them saying, we are declaring war on you. So it's kind of funny. Their message of reconciliation passes our ship that's going to the British saying, we're declaring war on you. So they literally pass one another. And so it's just kind of funny that if there had been text messaging in 1812, the War of 1812 probably never happened. Okay, but the bottom line is the Americans were kind of backed into a corner. You know, they had to do this. We had to fight. Okay, we had to make the British respect us, and it just had to be done. The reality check, though, is that America's not ready for war. Our army is an embarrassment. New England is not really a fan of this war. In fact, they call it Mr. Madison's War, and they refuse to send troops to even help fight this conflict. Okay, had New England really been behind this war, the outcome might have been a lot different. Okay, the Navy's in somewhat good shape, but it's still no match for the British. Okay, so anyways, our war goals are pretty straightforward. Number one, we need to gain respect. We have to end impressment, and we have to gain favorable trading agreements. That's huge. The second goal is kind of in two parts. Number one, we want to eliminate the Indian presence in the Ohio Valley and the Georgia-Mississippi area for white settlers. Okay, so much of the War of 1812 is basically an attack on the Native American presence in those areas. Okay, kind of 2A is to basically conquer Canada and eliminate that friendly base for the Native Americans. Okay, so the British are arming Native Americans in Canada. The Americans want to eliminate that. Okay, that's kind of the plan. So anyways, we're not going to go through kind of the details of the war, but basically there's a bunch of, I guess, parts of the War of 1812. We kind of start up the war by invading Canada. Okay, so we go after Canada, all right, and we basically go after this region right in here, okay, which is kind of like the worst area to go after because that's where all the loyalists went after the war. A lot of loyalists that left the United States after the Revolutionary War went and settled here. And so you're going to find some pretty fierce resistance here. Had the Americans attacked up here in Montreal, where there's more of a French presence, they might not have met such fierce resistance, and had they taken Montreal, that would have really cut off the other part of Canada here. Okay, remember, Canada looks huge, but it's really not. It's basically unsettled. So most of the British or the Canadian population is in these Great Lakes areas. Had taken Montreal up, and things might have turned out very different. But anyways, the invasions of Canada fail. We get thrown back. However, we do win several naval battles on the Great Lakes, the Eastern Great Lakes specifically, Erie and Ontario. Okay, and so that is somewhat successful for us. We stop any British invasion of our states. Unfortunately, though, eventually Napoleon loses over in Europe, and the British have more of a military to send, and so they send a fleet with two commanders. I won't say their names, but this is one of the more embarrassing moments in American history. Is that this fleet basically enter the Chesapeake, go to Washington D.C., crush the militia that is defending Washington D.C., and the British enter our capital and burn it to the ground. So, sorry, there's going to be an announcement here in a sec.
Milena Copleen, please call extension 3910. Again, Mrs. Milena Copleen, extension 3910.
Sorry about that. So anyways, D.C. is burnt to the ground. That's obviously very embarrassing. So anyways, the war is pretty much fought to a draw, though. Neither side can really have an advantage over the other. The British do burn D.C., but D.C. back then was not an important city. It was pretty small. It wasn't very important at the time. Obviously, if D.C. was burnt down now, that would be an issue because that's obviously a very important part of our country now. But back then, it really wasn't. It was more of a symbolic thing. The British do try to take Baltimore, But there's a fort that's protecting Baltimore called Fort McHenry, and the fort is able to hold off the British attack on Baltimore. And that is where, of course, we have Francis C. Scott, who basically is watching the battle, and he writes the Star-Spangled Banner. So anyways, the biggest victory for the Americans is the Battle of New Orleans, where the British are trying to invade the city of New Orleans, which is probably one of the most important cities we had back then because it controlled the Mississippi River. And ironically enough, this is pretty interesting too, because of slow communication, the British and the Americans did not know that the war was over. Before the Battle of New Orleans was actually fought, a peace treaty was signed between the British and the Americans. But the word of that peace treaty had not gotten to the Americas. So basically, the Battle of New Orleans, where the British just get clobbered, they basically do a frontal assault on Americans behind a wall, and they lose like 2,000 men. And it makes Andrew Jackson like the greatest American hero of the day. This battle was fought after the war was over because of the slow communications. So anyways, the Treaty of Ghent in late 1814, it's actually, I think it's signed on Christmas Eve of 1814, basically ends the war, and really nothing changes. The order of councils are not withdrawn. Impressment is not ended. The one good thing, I guess, is for the Americans is that they eliminated the Indian presence on the frontier, so the Native Americans get just walloped by Andrew Jackson in the South and by other armies in the North. Okay, so for the Americans, it's kind of a win in that way, but both sides just agree to stop fighting. They say, you know what, this is not worth it. There's no point to this. Neither side is strong enough to defeat the other. Everyone's tired of fighting, and they just kind of agree to stop. So it's kind of a very interesting end to the war. Alrighty, as far as effects or consequences of the War of 1812, is we see the death of the Federalist Party. The Federalist Party is completely discredited during this war, mainly because the Federalist Party in New England seems very un-American or not very patriotic. At the Hartford Convention, there was some serious complaints being brought against the government. There was some kind of crazy talk about secession. It wasn't really that serious, but there was talk of it. And so, they come out of the Americans come out of this war feeling very proud of themselves for the fight that they had, the fight they put up against the British. And the Federalist Party, they just look petty and they look very un-American. So they pretty much lose all power in the party, and the party just dies. And we actually then shift to basically a one-party state, which is very unusual. Anyways, there is a measure of respect that is thrown our way after this war. Our diplomats in Europe are treated with more respect because we did stand up for ourselves. We might not have performed that great on the battlefield, but we did stand up to the British, okay, and that warranted some respect. The country is incredibly proud of itself, so nationalism is a huge effect of the War of 1812. The country, as your book says, the country did not fight as one, but it has merged as one nation. Okay, D.C. is built into a much more beautiful and impressive capital. Okay, the Navy and the Army are expanded and made stronger. The Army's not going to be at the level of a European army at that time, but still it's going to be expanded. The Navy is going to be made a lot more respectable as well. Also, the war produces a lot of war heroes. Basically 3 presidents: Harrison, Jackson, Monroe, all become presidents and are heroes of the War of 1812. Okay, once again, we see kind of this theme going on, starting with the Revolutionary War. But because of all of our trading issues, the fact that we can't get European goods, it really starts to plant the seeds for manufacturing. And we see manufacturing building up, especially in New England. And eventually, like I said, we're going to see the Industrial Revolution really kind of explode in this country later on in the 19th century. And also, like I've already mentioned, the Star-Spangled Banner comes from this war as well. So anyways, like I said, most Americans don't really think about this war a lot, but there it is, the War of 1812. And notice here, this is the Star-Spangled Banner. Count the stripes: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 15 stripes. So they used to give a stripe per state that was admitted, and eventually they thought that would look too silly, and they stopped. So anyways, have a great day.